Welcome to this revision course to do with ACCA Paper F1. Now, as you are all aware, the ACCA F1 exam is a purely multiple choice exam. There will be 50 questions chosen at random from across what's called a question bank. So there are a number of questions, a few hundred of them, in the question bank, and the computer will randomly select a set of questions for you when you sit down and do the exam. That means that in the unfortunate event that you weren't passing the exam and you reset it, you would get a different set of questions each time. Now, the good thing about F1, when we're talking about the multiple choice exam, is unlike F2 or F3, you will probably find that time is not going to be too much of an issue. In F2 and F3, because there are calculations to perform, those will take you some time in the exam. F1, there aren't any calculations to do. So, although you get a reasonable amount of time for the exam, you probably won't need all of it anyway. On top of that, there will be some questions which you just look at and you immediately will know the answer. There will be a few questions, and hopefully not many, but there may be a few, where you will look at it and you will think, I have no idea what that question's even talking about. The F1 syllabus is potentially extremely large because it's talking about a lot of different areas. On the tuition course, we've covered the main areas and we've talked about the main theories. So we've done a little bit from every single area. We've done the bits that are most likely to be examined. But to be honest with you, to cover the entire syllabus would mean that we would have to have a course that was probably 4 times as long. So there will be, maybe, hopefully not, but there is a chance that there is a question on there that you haven't seen. Well, fine, you make a guess, you move on. As far as the questions are concerned, there's really only 2 kinds. The first type is simply going to be a theoretical question. So there are 4 P's in the marketing mix: product, price, place, and the examiner will give you 4 choices for the final one. So hopefully those are relatively easy because you either know the answer or you don't. You might, even if you don't know exactly what the answer is, you might be able to narrow it down and be able to say, well, I know it's not A and I know it's not B, so at least if I have to guess, I'm guessing it's either C or D. The other kind of question that you get is a scenario question. They will tell you a little bit about a situation. It might be a person, it might be a department, it might be a division, but it will be applying a model. So they might have, here is a particular person, when they learn, they like to learn by trying things. They don't like to read about them, they like to actually have a go at it. If we were talking about Honey and Mumford, how would they describe this person? Are they a reflector? Are they an activist? Whatever. So again, the idea will be there will be enough clues in the scenario that you will be able to work out which of those 4 approaches to learning is the best and most appropriate one to fit in with the facts that you're given. So those are the 2 main things that you get. The other thing just to bear in mind is that there may be a question where you feel that there is more than one answer. Again, it's not like F2 or F3 where we're talking about numbers. Because we're talking about words, sometimes you might feel that there is more than one answer. The examiner might say, what is the best way of doing something? Well, the trouble with that is you might think one way is best, the examiner might think a different way is best. The safest thing to do is to go with whatever you think first. You read through the 4 answers. I immediately think it's C. That's my answer. I think C is the best one. If that's what you think, don't try and go back and change your mind. Is it actually B? Was I right with C? Because all you'll do is you'll waste time and you'll just get yourself confused as to what's actually the best answer. So if you read through something and your immediate instinct is that's the right one, then I would stick with that and move on. Please remember, when you are doing this exam, that you don't have to get everything correct. One of the big mistakes that students make in all exams, whether they're multiple choice exams or whether they're written exams, is thinking they have to get everything right. There is no problem at all if you get some of it wrong. So if there are some questions that you can't do, then don't worry about it. Simply move on and forget about the ones you can't do. Move on and talk about the ones that you can do. There may be some questions that you're not sure about. You perhaps didn't even have a first instinct, which you thought that's the correct answer. There'll be some that you thought, I don't know what to do. Well, just have a guess, note down the number of the question. At the end of the exam, you can always come back and have another go at it. You actually can keep going backwards and forwards between the question all the way through until you finally submit, yes, I am now finished, or until the exam runs out, till the time runs out. So there is no problem at all with you going back to things. So maybe keep a piece of paper that's going to have on it, I don't know what to do with question 4, so I will come back and do that one. So the idea is simply to just have a sensible approach to the exam. And what we're going to do to look at this is we're going to go through the pilot paper that the ACCA produced back in June 2007 to give people an idea of what F1 would be like. As I say, every single exam is going to be different. If you're sitting at one computer and a friend's sitting at the next one, you will get 2 different exams. So I can't go through a typical exam, but what I can go through is this is the one that the ACCA have given us and say this is the kind of questions that you will get. So the first thing then, we are going to have 2 hours to do 50 questions, which sounds a lot, but in fact it isn't. 2 hours, 120 minutes, 50 questions. That means we've got round about 2 minutes. In fact, it's just over 2 minutes, but 2 minutes to do each question. Well, if you have a look, for example, at question 1, 2 minutes, there's nothing to calculate. You'll either know it or you won't know it. So 2 hours is not going to be time pressured. You're going to have plenty of time in this exam, so there's no need to panic about it. Right, let's start then by looking at question 1. So all we're going to do is we're just going to go through these questions in the same order that they are on the paper. As we go through them, some of them will relate to some theories that we've talked about on the course. Some of them might be new bits. Some of them will be just common sense. We will just try and have an approach to each of them. So, question 1. An organisation restructures. What does restructuring mean? Changing the way that it's organised. And the way it's going to do it is it's going to be doing a delayering exercise. And because of a delayering exercise, you should remember what that means. It means getting rid of levels of management. So if you get rid of levels of managers, it means there are fewer managers. So the question says, we have delayered. We've got rid of some managers. Will we have a shorter scalar chain and a narrower span of control? True or false? Right, narrow span of control, larger span of control. Which one is more likely if we have decided to get rid of layers of management? Well, if we've got rid of levels of management, there won't be as many managers. So the managers that are left are going to have to look after more people. The span of control is going to get wider. It's not going to get narrower. So, question 1, the answer is false. And hopefully you can see how I did that. I simply said, what do I know about delayering? And I applied it to this particular question. So I have to know the theory, but more importantly, I'm applying my knowledge. Let's have a look at question 2. Which of the following is the main function of marketing? Now, this is a straightforward theory question, which hopefully we either know or we don't know. Let's see if there are any bits of these. There's 4 suggestions. Let's see if there's any bits that we know are wrong. To maximise sales volume. Well, that's not marketing. That's sales. To identify and anticipate customer needs. That sounds like a possibility. Part C. To persuade potential consumers to convert latent demand into expenditure. That sounds like it might be something to do with marketing, because latent demand means people are thinking about buying something but they haven't done it yet. So that one is also a possibility. D, to identify suitable outlets for goods. That means where should we sell them? Now that is part of marketing because it's talking about the place that we sell them, but it's not the main area of marketing. So unfortunately, D is also wrong. So I now have a straightforward choice between B and C. B, remember, identify and anticipate customer needs. C, persuade people to convert demand into expenditure. Hopefully you remember that the technical definition of marketing is actually B, to identify and to work out what consumers are going to want in the future. Now, I hope you would agree with me that that question is actually relatively straightforward. It's a straightforward definition. And you can see that that particular question is 2 marks. So I would hope everybody could be pretty certain that they've got 2 marks for that one. And we move our way on. Question 3. Which of the following has become an established best practice in corporate governance? What is corporate governance? It's all about the way that companies and organisations are run. So it says, which of these has become best practice? So let's just have a read of them and see what makes the most sense. So, A, an increasingly prominent role for non-executives. Non-executives are very important. We talked about that on the course. So that sounds like a possibility. B, an increase in the powers of external auditors. Well, external auditors is not to do with corporate governance. Corporate governance is inside the organisation. So B, So B has got to be wrong. C, greater accountability for directors who are in breach of their fiduciary duties. So in other words, if they get something wrong, they have to accept the consequences. That sounds like a possibility as well. And finally, D, a requirement for all companies to establish an internal audit function. D sounds okay until you remember it says all companies. So that would include companies that perhaps only employ 1 or 2 people. Well, they're not going to be best practice. It's not going to be for them to have an internal audit function. It would be stupid. So D's got to be wrong as well. So we come down to a choice of A or C. Either non-executive directors getting more power or greater accountability. Now, if you think about it, greater accountability would probably be legal. But this question doesn't ask about the law. It says best practice. Best practice means what should we do? The law would mean what must we do? So C, anything there would be legal. So it's going to be A, by a process of elimination. Now again, I would fully accept that some of you will look at that and say it's obviously A. Great. But if you need to go through and think, well, I know it's not D and I know it's not C and I know it's not B, then you're left with A as the right answer. That's the way you'll have to do some of them. Some of them you will be able to look at and say, I know the answer. But some of them you'll have to work out, well, it's not the other 3. So even if I'm not convinced it's A, there is nothing left. So it will have to be A. So hopefully that one's not too difficult either. Number 4. We have a higher education teaching organisation. So presumably this is talking about a college or a university. There is an academic faculty which is organised into courses and departments. So it's telling me how it's structured. Their teaching staff report to the course programme managers and to subject specialists, depending on which course they teach and upon their particular subject specialism. So we've been told how it's set up. So if I am a lecturer in this particular college, it means that I've got 2 bosses. I have to report to a subject specialist who tell me how to teach something, and I'll have to report to a programme manager who tell me what I've got to teach. So the idea is going to be, it then says which of the 4 stereotypes, which cultural stereotype are we going to follow? And you should remember from the notes that we had role cultures, task cultures, power cultures and person cultures. Are there any of those that we know are wrong? It's not going to be a person culture, because a person culture is basically looking at people who work in the same building but they're not really being managed. It can't be that one because we know that each lecturer reports to at least 2 people. So it's not that one. Is it going to be a power culture? Well, a power culture means one person telling everybody else what to do. Well, it's obviously not that one either, because if it was, it would say that there is one person who gives you an order, you must do it like this. So it's either going to be a role culture or a task culture. Does it say that we have to follow a set of rules? Does it tell us, we have to teach in a particular way? No. All it says is that you've got to report to a subject specialist and you've got to report to a program manager. It doesn't say you're told how to do the teaching. So, it's not going to be A either. By a process of elimination, it's going to have to be B. So it's going to have to be a task culture. As long as I keep these two bosses happy, the subject specialist and the program manager, I can teach it in the way that I want to. As long as I cover the whole syllabus, they're not going to worry too much. So it's going to be a task culture. Final one that we have on the first page, question 5. At what stage of the planning process should we carry out a situation analysis? A situation analysis is another word for something like a SWOT. When should we do it? It says when we've converted strategic objectives into tactical plans. Now that means we have already decided what we're going to do. Well, to be honest, a situation analysis needs to come before that because we need to think about what we will even be able to do based on what's going on in the outside world. So it's not A. When formulating a mission statement, well, that one's not true either because a mission statement never changes, whereas a situation might do. So it can't be B either. When validating the effectiveness of plans against outcomes, that one even sounds complicated. That presumably comes at the very end because it means what did we think we were going to do? Did it work? So again, by a process of elimination, it's got to be D. We do a situational analysis when we're trying to decide what we're even going to be able to achieve. If the economy is not very good, it's unrealistic for us to think that sales is going to go up by 35%. So when we're even setting our objectives, what do we think sales will go up by? We have to think about what's going on in the outside world. So question 5, the answer there will also be D. So I hope you can see, just based on those first 5 that we've done, you can see that there is a lot of scenarios in there and there is a lot of knowledge in there. And that's basically the only 2 things that we have. Let's move on. 5 down, 45 to go. So, question 6. Which one of the following is an advantage of decentralisation? Now, notice it says potential advantage. If you remember at the start of this course, I said one of the problems that we get with F1 is what you think is a potential advantage might be different to the examiner. So if you're not sure, go with your first instinct. Hopefully, it will be fairly obvious, but if it's not, if you think it might be more than one, go with your first instinct. So, greater control by senior management. Decentralisation means exactly the opposite. It means letting workers lower down the organisation, make their own decisions. So it's not A. B, risk reduction in relation to operational decision making. Well, if you let people lower down the organisation make decisions, then presumably there is more risk because they may not be as experienced. So B is also going to be wrong. C, more accountability at lower levels. Decentralisation is all about what goes on down at the bottom. So that one is definitely a possibility. And D, consistency of decision making across the organisation. Well, if I let lots of different people make their own decisions, again, I'm doing completely the opposite of that. So D cannot be correct. Again, process of elimination, C's got to be the right answer. If you think about it, C makes sense anyway. Question 7. Which one of the following is an example of an internal stakeholder? An internal stakeholder is somebody who is interested in the organisation, but who works inside the organisation. So, it cannot be a shareholder, because they're outside. It cannot be a non-executive director, because they're outside. And it can't be a supplier, because they're outside. Again, process of elimination, that one C. Now, I think that one, again, is relatively easy. I think most of you could look at that and you'd be fine. So, I'll put a tick next to that one, because that one I'm confident that all of you would get. That's another 2 marks. So we've got 4 that we're certain about so far. Remember, if we got 2 marks earlier on the first page for one we were pretty certain about. Part number 8. According to Mendeley, all companies must pay most attention to the needs of which groups of stakeholders? If you remember, Mendeley talked about keep informs, keep satisfied, minimal efforts, and key players. And the ones that Mendeley said were the most important were the key players. What makes them the most important? What makes them the key players? If you remember, they had high power and high interest. In other words, D. That one, I'm pretty certain all of you would get again. So we're now up to 6 marks altogether. So again, we're working our way through. Remember, we only need 50, got 6 marks already. We're only on question 8. We're doing fine. Question 9. What is the responsibility of a public oversight board? Now, this is the kind of question that you may look at and you may think, I have got no idea at all what a public oversight board even is. So, we may just have to have a guess. The establishment of detailed rules on internal audit, the commissioning of financial reporting standards, the creation of legislation relating to accounting standards, the monitoring and enforcement of legal and compliance standards. Well, it's not B. I know that because that's all to do with financial reporting standards. That's the IASB. We mentioned that on the course. And I'm pretty certain that it's not C because it's talking about legislation. That would be government. So it's not those ones. It's either A or D. So it's either the establishment of detailed rules on internal audit or monitoring legal and compliance standards. Public oversight. Oversight doesn't sound like internal audit. Oversight to me sounds like monitoring legal and compliance. So I would guess it's going to be D. Now, fortunately, I happen to know that that's the correct guess. But the fact it says public and oversight makes me think it's not internal auditing. So even if we weren't sure, we ought to be able to know it's not B and it's not C. We've got a 50-50 chance of guessing that one right. So if you've got 10 questions that you have to guess at, and each of them you've only got 2 choices, then hopefully you'll be able to at least get 5 of them right by guessing. Let's have a look at number 10. True or false? The population trend in many European countries is caused by an increasing birth rate and an increasing mortality rate. It says ageing population. Ageing population means people are getting older. Well, mortality rate, people are dying. If there were more people dying, people wouldn't be able to get older because they'd be dying. So that one doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Just like question 1, it just doesn't make sense. They're saying one thing and they're giving the opposite reason. So an ageing population would be because mortality rates are going down, not going up. So it's got to be wrong. So that one is false. And again, I would hope everybody would get that one. So we are now, I reckon, up to at least 7 marks that we're fairly confident about. Number 11. Which of the following is consistent with a government's policy objective to expand the level of economic activity? Expanding the level of economic activity basically means more money, people spending more. So hopefully when we look at these 4, 3 of them will be people spending less, and only 1 of them will be people spending more. Let's see what we've got. An increase in taxation. Well, if there's an increase in taxation, people have got less money. So A's got to be wrong. An increase in interest rates. Interest rates go up, people have to hand more money over to the bank, they've got less money to spend. So B's got to be wrong. An increase in personal savings. If people save more, they have less to spend. C's got to be wrong. And we are left with D, an increase in public expenditure. And I hope, if you look at that, an increase in public expenditure looks right anyway, because it means the government is spending more. That means there'll be more money going around. That one, again, I hope, relatively straightforward. So we'll have 2 marks there. That takes us all together now up to 9. So, by the end of the second page, first 11 questions, we are a fifth of the way through. And hopefully we've got 9 marks already. So we're a fifth of the way through, and we're a fifth of the way nearly to getting our number of marks that we need. So again, we're still doing okay. Remember, the 9 marks I've got there is the ones that I'm certain I've got right. I'm going to get some of the other ones right as well. So, question 12. Here you can see there is quite a lot to read. So what I would suggest that you do with this kind of question is you start by reading what the answers are. Because then we're more likely to try and work out what it is that the question is all to do with. So in this one, it's all to do with unemployment. Structural, cyclical, frictional or marginal. So, it's something to do with unemployment, and these are all reasons why people get made unemployed. So we're looking for a reason why somebody's being made unemployed. So Martin is an experienced shipbuilder, so it means he's got some skills. Based in a Western European city, due to significant economic changes in supply and demand for conditions, it means that Martin works for a shipyard which is now closed and is made redundant. Martin has some skills, and the skills are no longer needed. So, there was no other local demand for his skills within his own region, and he'd have to move to another country to obtain a similar employment, and could only find similar work locally through undertaking a year's retraining. Which one is that? Well, remember, the key bit here is he's got skills which now aren't needed. That's C. Frictional unemployment is you've got skills that are not needed anymore. So, question 12, straightforward application of your knowledge to the scenario. Question 13, an organisation carries out an environmental scan. Now, hopefully this one again will be relatively straightforward. An environmental scan means looking outside. So it can't be A, strengths and weaknesses are inside. It can't be C, because strategic options and choice are all to do with what we want to do. It's not looking at the outside world. D, inbound and outbound logistics is looking inside the company. Porter's value chain. The only one it can be is pest analysis. Political, economic, social, technological, looking at the outside world. So again, I would hope that one would be relatively easy. That one takes us up to 11. Question 14. Which of the following is data protection legislation designed to protect? So, you can see there, it's all to do with private individuals. And 2 of the answers include corporate entities. So all of them have got private individuals in, but 2 of them have got corporate entities. Is the Data Protection Act there to prevent something to do with companies? And the answer is no. So A and D are automatically wrong. So get rid of that. B and C are to do with private individuals. All private individuals on whom regulated data is kept, or on whom any data is kept. Well, data protection legislation is primarily designed to protect regulated data. So again, I can get rid of 2 of my answers, A and D, and then I can narrow it down to the other 2, and one of them looks better. The fact that one of them says regulated makes me feel that that's probably going to be the right answer. The alternative is to narrow it down to B and C and then just guess. But I would hope that everybody would be able to at least do that one. At least you could narrow it down to the 2 of them. And then if you have to guess, you've got 50-50 chance of getting it right. So, move on to question 15. Which of the following types of new legislation would provide greater employment opportunities in large companies? New laws on health and safety. Well, I don't really see what that's going to do to help promote jobs. New laws to prevent discrimination. Possibility. New laws making it difficult to dismiss employees unfairly. Sounds possible, but the thing is that the question doesn't talk about dismissal, it talks about employment opportunities. So it's not going to be C. New laws on a higher compensation for employers who breach employment contracts. Well, again, that's got nothing to do with employment opportunities. Employment opportunities is getting people jobs. So it's not D either. So it's going to have to be B. And again, I would hope that that one is relatively straightforward, which takes us up to 13 marks altogether. You could do that one by a process of elimination. I would hope that most of you actually wouldn't have to. Number 16. The total level of demand in an economy is made up of consumption, something, government expenditure, and net gains. The total level of demand, that must mean something to do with people buying things. Either they're buying them to use, consumption, or they're buying them because they need them for the future. Either way, you don't buy things if you're saving, and you don't buy things if you're being taxed. So the other possibility then is we buy things for investment. Now that one again is a straightforward knowledge one. I would hope that you would know that anyway, and even if you didn't, you could work that one out. So that one I will also mark down as one that I hope everybody would be able to do, taking us up to 14 marks. So you can see, again, some of these are knowledge-based, like question 16, and if we know the knowledge, we can just get it straight away. I would look at that, and hopefully you would look at that and would get C straight away. If we didn't, we know the ones it's not. It's not A, it's not B, we're left with C. Some of the other ones, like the one about the shipbuilder, are simply saying, right, now apply your knowledge. Question 17. Which set of environmental factors does a lobby group try and directly influence? Now, this is a good example of a question where it's a technical term. A lobby group, it may be something that you've not come across. If you have come across it, this question is incredibly easy. If you haven't come across it, you just have to guess. A lobby group is somebody who lobbies to get something changed to do with the law. So the answer is political. Now that one you either know or you don't know, I'm afraid. So there might be someone there that you think, I don't know, I will just guess. If you weren't sure about it, you might be able to guess by looking at the alternatives. It says we want to directly influence somebody. Can a person or a group directly influence the economy? Well, it's probably unlikely. Can they influence demographics? Unlikely, because demographics are all to do with populations. Can they directly influence what happens with technology? Again, unlikely. So if you didn't know what it is, you might be able to guess it's political because it's probably not the other three. But there is a good example of you either know it or you don't. Question 18. Adrian is the manager of a call centre. Consultants have advised him that by reorganising his teams to complete highly specific tasks, the call centre will be able to increase the throughput of work significantly. He's going to reorganise things to do highly specific tasks. So each person is going to be doing one particular job. It says here, the reorganisation proposals are unpopular because people feel their jobs will become tedious and repetitive. The proposal to reorganise it is looking at which school of management thought. Human relations, empirical, scientific or administrative. Now, if you look at that, the whole idea is we're going to tell people exactly what to do and make them do it over and over and over again. That is virtually the same as the definition we had of scientific management. The scientific management school, do it like this because I've told you. That, again, I would hope would be reasonably straightforward for everybody. So, therefore, that will take us up to 16 marks. That one ought to be pretty straightforward. Again, what you might have done is you might have read A, B, C and D first, so you know it's something to do with a way of thinking, and then gone back and actually read through the rest of it. Read through what the requirements actually were. 19. The original role of the accounting function. Well, again, straightforward knowledge. Hopefully one of these will jump out at us. It says the original role. So the original role of financial accounting was simply recording financial information. It was about knowing who owed us money and who did we owe money to. More recent things will be management information, financial control and managing funds efficiently. but the initial aspect was simply knowing who you owe the money to. So that one, again, I would suggest to you, pretty straightforward. I'm now up to 18 marks that I'm pretty certain about. Question 20. Tax avoidance is a legal activity, tax evasion is illegal. Straightforward definition. So is that true or is it false? And the answer is, that one is true. So tax avoidance is doing anything you can to not pay more tax than you should do. That's fine. Tax evasion is trying to get away from paying tax that you are supposed to. So that one is simply true. That one takes 20 seconds. Question 21. The system that's used by a company to record sales and purchases is an example of. So your basic recording of sales and purchases is a basic recording of your transactions. So it's a transaction processing system. Remember, a transaction processing system is the basic thing that you have. Without that, you can't do anything else. You can't provide any management information. So it can't be B, it can't be D, and I don't know what C is. An office automation system? What's that got to do with sales and purchases? So again, hopefully, that one, relatively straightforward, and a quick double check, that now takes us up to 20. So I reckon that we're now on 20 marks from 21 questions. Now again, remember the 20 marks are the ones I'm pretty certain about. We're probably guessing more of these anyway. Remember my target is 50. So I'm getting there, I'm doing okay. Question 22. Is this statement true or false? The implementation of a budgetary control system would be the responsibility of the internal auditor. You may remember from the notes that the internal auditor is there to make sure that the various controls that we have are being followed. A budgetary control system is more likely to be the finance department. So that one will be false. Question 23. Which type of organisation would have the retail prices it charges to personal consumers subject to close scrutiny by a regulator? Now, what does that one mean? The prices that it charges to consumers. Why would anybody be bothered? Nobody is that bothered about how much prices we charge to you. Well, obviously you are, but nobody is going to regulate that. So what kind of industries are most likely to be regulated? Is it going to be a multinational corporation? Is it going to be a multi-divisional conglomerate? Is it going to be a national utilities company? Or is it going to be a financial service provider? One of those should look different to the other four. And the one that really ought to look different is the fact you've got a utilities company. Because a utilities company does things like gas, electricity, because it's used by everybody and you can't avoid using it. You can't live without using electricity or without using water. So because everybody is forced to use it, the prices are normally looked at by the government. So that one would be C. Question 24. A central bank has announced a 2% rise in interest rates. The decision has the most impact on which department? Now again, I think this one is going to be obvious, but auditing? Don't think so. Financial accounting? It looks like it could be because it's to do with the bank, but remember financial accounting is simply recording the transactions that you've got. The fact the banks change the interest rate doesn't make any difference to the fact that the invoices still have to be recorded. So it's actually not C. It's got nothing to do with production whatsoever. It's Treasury. If you remember what Treasury does, Treasury is looking at things like how do we borrow money and where do we borrow it from. Interest rates will affect them. So again, I think that one is relatively straightforward. And so that means we've got another 2 marks, now taking us up to 22 altogether. Question 25. The major purpose of the International Accounts Standards Board, the IASB, is to ensure consistency in financial control, corporate reporting, or external auditing. Why do you have accounting standards? The reason is so that people report on their financial accounts in the same way so you can compare them. It's got nothing to do with external auditing, And it's got nothing to do with financial control, because financial control is internal. International accountants are for people outside the company. So it has to be B. So there's another mark. I'm pretty confident about 23 of them. Right, question 26. So we're now halfway through, and I'm pretty certain about 23 marks. Now, some of you might look at that and say, but hang on a second, we need 50 to pass. Halfway through, we should have got 25. We haven't got 25, but remember, these are the ones I'm certain about. Some of the other ones I will have got correct as well. So all I'm doing is I'm just keeping a record of the ones that I'm pretty confident about. I only need to have guessed one other one correctly, and I'm on course to pass. And this is what I want you to think about in the exam. Remember I said to you earlier, you don't have to get everything correct. Well, as long as there are some that I'm certain about, and I think it's quite a good idea to keep a note of them as you go along, you can look at it and say, well, I'm pretty confident about, in my case, 23 marks. I'm probably going to get one of the other ones right. I reckon, just by looking at what we've got there, I've probably said I'm confident about maybe 13 questions out of the first 25. That means there's 12 that I wasn't confident about, I haven't included in there. But I only really need to have got 2 of them right, and I'm safely through. So 2 out of 12, you could have guessed those. So it's all about, this particular paper, F1, is all about not really panicking about things. You're going to get a lot of it right using your common sense. Now, paper F2 and paper F3, as I say, because they take longer, you may not have time to do this. You may not have time to think, well, which ones am I sure about? All the ones that I'm sure about, keep a note of them. And if I've got time at the end of the exam, I will go back and look at the ones that I'm not sure about. But the ones that I am confident with, I'm just going to forget about. I'm not going to go back and revisit them. Yeah, paper F2 and F3, you don't probably have the time to do it anyway, but in this paper, you will do. So make a note of the ones that you are happy with. Go back if you've got time. Go back to the ones that you're not so happy with. But do be guided. Remember, your first instinct was probably the correct one. If you're really not sure, then just guess something. Right, question 26. Another example, like the one we had a little while ago with the shipbuilder, where there was a long scenario and then a fairly short requirement. Which member of the department works in the financial accounts function? So one person will be doing financial accounting and 3 people won't. So Farah, Gordon, Helen and Ian. So let's just work our way through and find which of them definitely don't. And that will leave us with one that does. So Farah, Gordon, Helen and Ian work in the finance department of X company, which has separate financial accounting and management accounting functions. Now the question says, which ones work for financial accounts? So I'm guessing the other 3 will work in the management accounting bit. So Farah deals with payroll, purchase ledger and sales invoicing. Well, that all sounds to me pretty much like paper F3. So that's a possibility. The only bit I'm not sure about is the payroll bit. Gordon, inventory valuation, budgetary control and variance analysis. Variance analysis is F2, so it's not Gordon. In fact, if you look at it, inventory valuation isn't Gordon, is F2 as well. So Gordon doesn't work in the finance accounting bit, works in the management accounting bit. Helen deals with fraud prevention, fraud detection and internal controls. Well, that's got nothing to do with debits and credits, so it's not Helen. And Ian carries out all the risk assessments, the investment appraisals. Well, that again, investment appraisals, net present values, that's not F3, it's F2. So, Farah was my initial guess. Farah looked like she was going to be the correct one because it talked about purchase ledger and sales invoices. So on my gut instinct would be Farah. But as it is, if you go through, you can work out that it must be Farah. It can't be any of the other ones. Okay then, moving on. Question 27. In an economic environment of high price inflation, those who owe money will gain, those who are owed money will lose. True or false? This is the kind of question that I think most people in the exam would have to guess at. If you know the answer, then great. But if you don't know the answer, this one is a bit difficult. I'll try and work it out, but to be honest, in the exam, I would probably guess at this one. It says high price inflation. Imagine that I borrow some money today and I borrow $5 million. At some point, I will have to pay that back in 10 years' time. So I've borrowed $5 million for 10 years. If there is high inflation, what does that mean? It means that $1 in 10 years' time will be worth a lot less than $1 today. So I borrow the money and I get the dollars today. By the time I have to physically hand them back in 10 years' time, they aren't worth as much. So the amount I hand back is actually not going to be worth as much as the amount I borrowed today. So that one is A. High price inflation is good for people who owe money, and it's bad for people that they owe the money to. Because you get the money today when it's worth a lot, where by the time you have to pay it back, it's not worth as much. So 27 is A. 28. Who is the Who is the internal auditor primarily accountable to? What's accountable mean? It means who do they have to go to and talk to and explain what they've done. If they make any mistakes, who's going to have a go at them? Internal auditors. Well, again, it's not the shareholders, that's the external auditors. They're not responsible to the employees. They are not responsible to the company. That's the external auditors again. Remember, the external auditors are appointed by the company on behalf of the shareholders. So two of them are external auditors. One of them has got nothing to do with it, the employees. So by process of elimination, that one would be D. And I hope, again, that would be one that all of you would be able to get right. Yeah, so hopefully, again, you probably looked at that and said that's A just by looking at it. Question 29. Which of the following is a disadvantage of a computerised accounting system? Now, that means we're going to have three things which are better about computerised systems and one thing which is worse. So one way to do this is simply to look at the things that are better and they're the wrong answer. So a computerised system is more time consuming to operate. Well, that's just wrong. A manual system is time consuming because you have to add things up. Computerised, you press a button and it's done. B, the operating costs of a computerised system are higher. Well, they might well be, but it might basically be, when we say that it's operating costs, once you've got it going, a computer system is cheaper. Because again, it's quicker, which means it doesn't cost as much. So the operating cost, that's the running costs. The computerised system is more costly to implement. Now that means implementation is setting up. Now that one does sound like a possibility. D, a computerised system is more error prone. Well, that one's just wrong again. So process of elimination, going to be C. I think, to be honest, again, you could look at that one and C ought to leap out at you as the obvious answer. So I reckon that everybody would be able to get that. We're now on 27 marks. We move on to question 30. Callum works in the internal audit department of Z company. All right. His duties involve the identification, evaluation and testing of internal controls. He produces reports to send to senior managers on these activities. What type of audit is Callum responsible for? So Callum is looking at testing internal controls. So he's not doing transactions audits because they're buying things, selling things. He's not doing a social responsibility audit. Excuse me, because a social responsibility audit is looking at things like, are we a good corporate citizen? Do we employ the right kind of people? Is he looking at operational or is he looking at systems? Well, he's looking at controls, and controls are systems. So again, I would put it to you that even if you didn't know it was D, you could guess it wasn't B or C. So you've got a 50-50 chance of getting that one right.